I think I bit off more than I could comfortably chew for Genrethon. If you're watching this and you don't know what the Genrethon is, it is a readathon which was hosted from the 10th to the 17th of April by Joss, Lauren, Kristen and Brittany. And I will have links to all of their channels down in the description. The idea behind this readathon was to read at least 3 books from 3 different genres, and it would thereby encourage you to pick up genres that you haven't really thought about before or you've been reluctant to pick up in the past. So I'm going to tell you how I got on with all of the books I chose. I chose 8 books, so let's see how I got on with those. The first book I picked up for the Genrethon was a children's book, and that was The Vile Village, which is the 7th book in a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket. If you somehow don't know anything about this series, it follows the 3 Baudelaire orphans after they lose their parents, and then each book is a different part of their lives as they try and escape from Count Olaf. This was probably my least favourite of the series so far. I did find the plot very easy to guess. I wasn't really surprised by anything that was in this. The plot of each of these books is it's basically the same, but kind of the details and intricacies I often don't always guess, and with this I definitely knew what was going to happen. In saying that, I still really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a great start to the Genrethon because I read it in one sitting really quickly, so I got off to a really good start and it made me feel really motivated going into the next book. The next book I read was a classic, and that was The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Kind of enjoyed this book. I don't want to tell you too much about it if you haven't read it yet, because you probably already know what the ending of it is. It's so ingrained in our culture now, it's so familiar to us. And I think that's one of the reasons I possibly didn't love this book. It was because I knew the ending. It's definitely a book I want to explore more and maybe look up some kind of analysis of it, because I found a lot of it really interesting. Just the act of reading it, I wasn't massively into. Next, I chose some literary fiction and I read Philip Roth's Everyman, and I quite enjoyed this book. I found the writing really easy and easy to get into, which definitely helped for the Genrethon and getting through all the books I chose quickly. And I found it really accessible. It's not the type of literary fiction where you're constantly confused. This is quite a simple story that just follows the life of this one everyman, and he is a really normal guy, probably similar to some men that you've known throughout your life or known of throughout your life. I didn't really like the character, but I don't think that was a massive problem. Because I don't think you're necessarily supposed to like him. I think you're just supposed to appreciate witnessing the journey that he goes through over this novel. If you are interested in stories about just regular, normal people, then I would definitely recommend this to you. I really enjoyed reading it, even though I wasn't that keen on the character. I managed to read those books in the first 2 days of Genrethon. On Sunday I read A Series of Unfortunate Events, and on Sunday I read The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then I finished Everyman on Monday. That's when my life started to get hectic. I went back to uni after Easter, and on Monday I was working 9 till 5 days and revision and stuff, and then at 5 I went back up to campus to go to some guest lectures and guest speakers and such. So I didn't have loads of time to read on Monday. I read Everyman that night. So I suddenly became aware that it was gonna be very tight very early on. The next book I picked up for the Genrethon was a historical YA, and that was Vinci's Tiger by L.M. Elliot. I did not enjoy this book. You may know this book as coming with the December Owl crate, and I don't know why it was chosen. I did not think this book was very good. I didn't think the dialogue was constructed well. Some of the description was quite good. I did kind of enjoy reading it, but I don't think it was good. I think I enjoyed reading it because it was very easy and simple to read. There's also not really a plot to this novel. and if there is, I kind of missed it. It being called Vincis Tiger as well, and really selling itself as showing the relationship between artist and muse, I was really disappointed that that relationship wasn't really in here. One of the things I went into this book really looking for was learning about that sort of relationship and what it's like, and there wasn't really much of this in the book at all. This was the worst book I read over the course of the Genrethon, which sucks. I didn't want there to be any bad books, but at least I've got this off my TBR now. Next, I read a parody or a humour book, and it was 50 Shades of Earl Grey by Fanny Merkin, and I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really funny. Obviously, this is a parody of 50 Shades of Grey, and if you have read that book, I think you will find this very funny because it definitely takes the piss out of a lot of things that James, is that what she's called? A lot of the like bad parts of her writing are really taken the piss of in this book, and it was really funny. I could not get through this in one sitting though, because obviously it is intentionally written poorly and the characters are very annoying. So I really struggled to get through this in one sitting. I think I had to break it up quite a lot reading other things, but it was definitely worth reading. I found it very, very funny. Disappointed with the lack of tea in it. Tea does feature, but not as much as I wanted. I wanted tea to be like a big plot driven thing. Next, I'm going to talk about my non-fiction pick for the Genrethon, and that was Natasha Walters' Living Dolls, The Return of Sexism. There are 10 sort of sections in this book, and I planned on reading like one a day, and then on some days I'd be able to read 2. That didn't happen. Because I was so busy with uni work and such, I ended up doing it quite frequently where I was like, oh, I'll read 2 or 3 chapters tomorrow, and then it never happened, and I actually ended up having to do over half this book in one sitting, which did get quite difficult, and I will explain why. So how I planned on reading this book didn't really work. I think if it had worked, it would have definitely been the best way to read this book. But I didn't manage to do that. So this is broken up into 10 sections, like I said, and they include things like pole dancers and prostitutes, pornography, lovers, princesses, stereotypes. The first half of the book is very anecdotal, and it is very much based on interviews that Natasha has done with various women, whereas the second half of the book is very much like science and research based. I really enjoyed both. I found the more scientific section really useful in like acknowledging that the things I think are actually backed up by legit studies that have been done, but it does make for quite dense reading, which was really quite difficult when I was trying to plow through it. But in saying that, I really, really enjoyed. The anecdotal first half of it I found less enjoyable because it was slightly outdated. Some of the references, like she's talking about like the Sugar Babes and Girls Aloud and Rachel Stevens, which I don't know how many people younger than me would know who they are. If you're at least in your 20s, you will not be too unfamiliar with what she's talking about in the first half, but I do think it's quite outdated, and it doesn't talk about a lot of the more relevant current issues that are going on in feminism at the minute, with like the emergence of more figures and how things have changed over the past couple of years. Just checked, and this was published in 2010, so even though that's only 6 years ago, there are a lot more relevant examples now 6 years on, and that's my only sort of criticism of this, is that it is slightly outdated. I would definitely recommend this to someone who has like quite a basic knowledge of feminism and wants to take it to like the next level, particularly for like the scientific side of things. It does require like a lot of thinking. It's definitely more in depth than a lot of like intro to feminism-esque books. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was really great. Next, for horror, I read The Rat by James Herbert, and I really, really enjoyed this book, and I didn't expect to. This book definitely, you know, got the aims of the Genrethon. It made me pick up a genre that I'd kind of avoided in the past, and it made me really, really enjoy it. This is about what happens in North London when rats become the size of dogs and they get a taste for human flesh. So tense. It is very gruesome, by my standards anyway. If you're used to horror, it might not be that gruesome, but for me it definitely was. There are very vivid descriptions of rats, you know, eating human beings. I really enjoyed how this was written as well. There is like a main narrative of one particular character and his experiences with the rats and how he becomes involved in like the extermination of them. But there are kind of like short stories as well where you get glimpses into particular people's lives, just for one chapter, and how the rats kill them and then eat them. I really enjoyed those just kind of like singular chapters on one person. I wasn't sure about the representation of women in this book. I couldn't tell whether it was the characters or the author at times, but it didn't bother me enough to hinder my enjoyment of what was a really well constructed story. It is less than 200 pages and I would really, really recommend this to anyone, but particularly if you haven't really tried out horror before. It was really well written, really easy to read, genuinely tense at moments for me, and very, very gruesome. And finally, I read a poetry collection, which I'm no stranger to, but you can always read more poetry. I don't think I can ever get enough of reading poetry. And the one I chose for the Genrethon was Rapture by Caroline Duffy. Caroline Duffy is the current Poet Laureate and she is one of my absolute favourite poets. I always love her work. And this is a collection of her love poems, and they're like very sensual and quite intense at moments. I'm not really into like sensual love poetry. It's not my most favourite thing, so this actually ended up slotting into the Genrethon quite well, and it isn't my favourite Caroline Duffy collection that I've read for that reason, but I still massively enjoyed it, and two poems in particular, Tea, which I'd already read, I didn't know was from this collection, and I absolutely love her poem Tea, it's amazing. And also one called Chinatown, which I really, really enjoyed. This was my final book for Genrethon and I was really glad that I got to finish with a writer that I really, really love, and overall I ended Genrethon on quite a high. So in terms of like pure enjoyment of the books, Genrethon was quite mixed for me. I had a really productive start, and then I slowed down a lot and was reading books that I wasn't massively into, and then at the end I did like one massive push to catch up on how I'd fallen behind, and I was reading books that I really, really enjoyed. My TBR was probably too ambitious, considering all the uni work I had to do, like writing essays, and you know that involves reading a lot of, you know, critical stuff. So those books weren't the only ones that I was reading a lot of critical essays. So if the girls run this again next year, and I really hope they do, or even sooner than next year, it could be like biannually or something, whatever you want to do, I would definitely participate again, but I would probably be a lot more sensible about it and tailor it to how much other work I need to do as well. Yeah, overall, Genrethon was a brilliant, productive and enjoyable experience. If you have done a wrap-up for Genrethon, I will be sure to check it out. Have you read any of these books before, and did any of your thoughts differ from mine? And how was your Genrethon experience? I just want to thank the girls that ran the Genrethon. You did a great job, and unfortunately I wasn't able to join in with a lot of the sprints because of my crazy busyness, but you guys did a great job and thank you for hosting.